Hello, I'm doing a book review, and the book I want to review is The Paradiso by Dante Alighieri. Now, this is the third and final part of Dante's epic poem, The Divine Comedy, the first two parts of this work being the Inferno and the Purgatorio. Now, I already reviewed the first two parts of this poem, and I'll leave links in the description below to where you can check out those reviews. Now, it's believed that Dante wrote The Divine Comedy sometime between the years 1308 and 1320. Now, Dante Alighieri was an Italian poet, philosopher, and politician who was born and grew up in the Italian Republic of Florence. But Dante was eventually forced into exile due to his criticisms of Pope Boniface VIII, who Dante hated with a passion. Dante was part of a group of Florentines who opposed the Pope and felt that the Pope had too much power. Now, because Pope Boniface was the source of so much of Dante's anguish, both in real life and in the fictional universe of the Divine Comedy, not counting Satan in the Inferno, if the Divine Comedy has what could be called an antagonist, it probably would be Pope Boniface VIII, despite him never physically appearing in the story. Now, I've read Paradiso maybe 3 times now, and I love this book, don't get me wrong, but I'll admit, compared to the first two parts of the Divine Comedy, I maybe understand about half of this, and part of that is because in this, Dante is kind of describing the indescribable, because his version of heaven is described as a place of indescribable beauty, that no living man can really comprehend heaven. And the idea is that Dante is only writing what his memory would allow, or what God allows him to remember about this place. But it's not only that, even though this is an English translation of the poem, this is actually the Henry Wadsworth Longfellow translation. Even the English translation is still written in Old English, so it's not the easiest to read. But that's the fault of my own dumbassery, it's not the fault of the work itself. I still think this is an absolutely beautiful poem and a beautiful conclusion to the Divine Comedy. But the plot of Paradiso is, after being guided through Hell and Purgatory by the spirit of the poet Virgil, Dante is now being guided through heaven by Beatrice, a woman that Dante knew when he was younger, who died when she was very young, and Dante uses Beatrice as his symbol of divine love, and in a way is kind of the mouthpiece for God. And throughout the poem, Beatrice takes Dante across the cosmos, visiting the different levels or spheres of heaven, with the final level, which all reality emanates from, being the mind of God. So heaven in Dante's vision is basically the space outside of Earth. So the sun, the moon, the stars, and the planets are all different spheres of heaven, according to Dante. Now, it should be noted that in Dante's time, many people believed the Earth was the center of the universe. Obviously, in the 21st century, we realize that no, the sun is actually the center of our solar system, and the Earth and the other planets simply revolve around the sun, and our solar system is just one of many. But we have to remember that this book was written in the Middle Ages. But honestly, for the time, it was a pretty unique interpretation of heaven. Now, I'm not sure if this is what Dante literally believed heaven to be like, but it's interesting how Dante's version of heaven almost seems to have a hierarchy, where in some respects your station in life and how righteous you were in your lifetime will determine your place in heaven. But Beatrice does say something to Dante that kind of recontextualizes everything. That basically everything Dante is seeing is just a metaphor. Once again, he's really only seeing of heaven what his mind and what God will allow him to see. Basically, Dante is merely seeing heaven as he would understand it as a mortal man. But he's also acknowledging that no living human can really comprehend heaven or really comprehend God. I believe there's a quote from the Bible, "We only see God through a glass darkly," and I feel like that quote really applies to this poem, because that's how Dante is seeing heaven, essentially. Now, the character of Beatrice is said to be based on Beatrice Portinari, who is a woman that Dante met when they were both children. Now, by all accounts, Dante only actually met this woman maybe 3 or 4 times in his entire life. Now, she died when she was 24, and Dante was apparently absolutely distraught over her death, again, despite the fact that he hardly even knew this woman. But she became his artistic muse. In fact, Dante's first written work was a book called La Vita Nuova, which translates to The New Life, which was a collection of love sonnets dedicated to Beatrice. And actually, La Vita Nuova works as a pretty good companion piece, or even prologue to the Divine Comedy. But it's weird to look at it from a 21st century perspective, because Dante hardly knew this woman, and yet she became the basis for essentially his entire body of work, or at least his most famous poems. And in the story, Dante literally idealizes this woman, like he makes her the voice of God, and I've also heard some people say that she's supposed to represent Christ in the story, as well as the Virgin Mary. I kind of look at Beatrice as sort of a representation of Dante's struggle between his own lustful desires and his devotion to Christianity. But yeah, the Paradiso is an excellent poem, and you don't have to be a Christian or even believe in God or the afterlife in order to enjoy this. Like, you could just look at this as a really good piece of poetry. And this poem, along with the entirety of the Divine Comedy, this is a book that was written 700 years ago, and yet people are still reading and talking about it to this day. Like, this is a story that really has stood the test of time and has influenced so much in terms of how people view religion and how people view the afterlife. So yeah, that was my review of Paradiso by Dante Alighieri, and bye.